Welcome to Sorting Through Life with Colleen Waterston on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I am Colleen Waterston, your host, and also the owner and lead organizer of Space by Space Organizing, a home organizing business here in the Twin Cities of wonderful Minnesota. And I am here today with Rachel Schromen, our show's resident estate attorney, elder law attorney, and general great gal. Today we are going to talk about stuff, about downsizing, about leaving your belongings behind. That could be everything from the diamond ring, the house, and the cash, or the investment. There's so much that we accumulate in our life, and then it's that we let it go. And I think when designing this show, I always knew I wanted to have an estate attorney be involved. But I am the daughter of a funeral director, and I've realized, especially, I've had my business for a few plus years now, and so I've realized how much growing up in a funeral business and surrounded by the fact that we all die and just having that be part of life is unique and has really informed my values and my carpe diem approach. I have a travel memoir I'm going to put out in the world one day, but I described it like my dad was the epitome of stable as I grew up. Like he's always been so stable at the helm of a family funeral business, I think is what I say. But that gave me, but he never stood in my way of, carpe dieming, my life away, because I think it was like to be raised by somebody who saw death at all ages and all circumstances. And, in the middle of a rise in life and you're just taken out of it. And, in the middle of just after having a child, children. And so to be raised very intimately in that environment and just kind of have it be a backdrop to how I saw the world, I think is just so formative. I've really learned is so formative. And I think that it also is enormously motivating for me. I don't find the fact that we die depressing. I find the fact that we live exciting and motivating. And what am I going to do with my life? And how can I, and I love helping people get out of their own way so that they can live an amazing life. But if we are here, that's the one thing we have in common, is that if you are a human in human form, in breathing and experiencing this earth through it, you one day won't be. Your soul will pass and your body will be what once housed it, and you will not, not to get to any spiritual belief, just that we die. And we don't really know, some people have better ideas about what happens and some people don't, but we won't be here. And no matter how much money somebody has, no matter how much power or prestige someone has in their life, not a single person has been able to take their stuff with them to heaven. We have Egyptian pharaohs who buried their stuff with them in pyramids. We have, the Taj Mahal is like this gorgeous funeral, final resting place for some fancy person's lover, I think, or second, we've memorialized people, we've shrined things, but there's a lot of stuff people leave behind. And where you come in, Rachel, is helping people to plan what happens and what they would like to happen to everything that they have accumulated, which is an item, like a small item, a massive asset, investment accounts, debt, and also like even legacy and kind of some of those more intangibles of, we're going to talk at the end about money and gifting and leaving behind, a legacy through a charitable gift. So I help people, it's pretty straightforward. Go to my website, Space by Space Organizing. I help people go through their items, and I can speak to that all day. But you're here. So um when people have their items,
Yeah.
how does like a will,
Mm-hmm.
how does writing it down, how does the legal element come into place with who gets what,
Yeah.
where things go, and expressing your wishes
Mm-hmm.
for when you are no longer the keeper?
So with like what we call items, or more like the things that you have in your house, uh, we call it tangible personal property. Your precious moments collections, your cars, your furniture, your jewelry, your family heirlooms, those types of personal property can often be passed by a written list. Now, at our office, when we draft documents, we put language in wills or trusts that will legally incorporate a list that can be kept with your document, that just needs to be signed and dated and can be updated by you without having to update the entire document. So every once in a while, I'll have a client come in and they say, well, I really want to make certain that my wedding ring goes to my daughter. I really want, uh, well, my gun collection to go to my son. I really want the piano that I got from my grandma to go to my sister. Um, we can draft those things directly into a will. And if you want to change it later, you're then doing a legal process to update. However, for those types of things, as long as they're not, if you have an original Monet painting, don't put that on a list. That's worth a lot. High value items are going to have a different impact. You can't put cash on a written list. You can't put
Okay.
$25,000 to this person. You actually, coin collections are considered cash. Those can't
That's
go on
good to
written lists.
know.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then real property, land, you can't pass that by a list. But for those other more sentimental, but just as important, if not more important things, a written list is a really slick way to do it. So, for example, I have a trust in place. I've updated my personal property list once or twice, but I haven't had to update the actual trust itself. Now, arguably for me, I can sit and draft my own amendment, but I still have to do it. I still have to find two witnesses. I still have to pull someone to notarize it. Really nice when I can just get the list out, update that, sign it, date it, put it away.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something like hiring, my business with Legacy Lifters, like we can help go through your house and make
Yeah,
that list,
and make the list.
and also even attach, I'm working with a client that we're, capturing the stories around some of the items
Yeah.
so that we can
Oh,
make
yeah.
sure that,
That
why,
people know.
where
Yes.
did this come from? And, one of the things was this big piece of art, and I asked her the story on an audio, with
Oh,
Remento as the platform where I
yeah.
had
Yeah.
Charlie Green, the CEO, on. And so we're eventually going to have a book that's like a catalog of these more important items
Mm-hmm.
to her, with the story in a QR code that you can pull up and listen. But it wasn't as much about the item. They
No.
just liked it on a trip. But
Yeah.
it was fun to hear that, getting it back through, there was no way that it fit on the airplane.
Oh.
And they ended up, like, the pilots put it, this was probably a long time ago, they wouldn't do it now, but decades ago when there were less regulations, the pilots flew with this parrot from, it was
Funny.
a piece of art, like
Yeah.
a parrot that, and they said, do you mind having this parrot up in there, in the cockpit? And so that was kind of the fun story about it, to think, okay, well, when the day comes that someone's like, I don't even know where they got this. Like, where
Yes.
was that? It's documented. But so just having a list, how much do you find people wanting to itemize by value so that siblings, our last episode that we had, we talked about the people that you name for things.
Mm-hmm.
And that you name to be responsible for the decisions about
Mm-hmm.
your body, your finances, all the things that happen. But now this episode, we're really focusing on who gets what.
Right.
And so we talked last time about the tension that can come
Yes.
between siblings and, why do you get to be mom's executor and not me?
Yes.
And so that's been covered.
Yep.
But now when it's like, well, why do you get that? That's worth $5,000 and I
Yeah.
got this and it's worth 200, like
Well, yes, I 100% follow. So it varies and it depends on the situation, the family dynamic, and frankly, the person's intention with how they're doing things. Now, um, when I talk with clients, there's a difference between fair and equitable, and what is fair is relative. And so, I have some clients where fair means down to the penny. In those situations, appraisals. You can have
mm,
appraisals done, you can draft documents a certain way that personal property is appraised and the value of each item is considered, yada, yada, yada. In really contentious estate administrations, there's appraisal companies that will go through and they appraise every single item in the house. And that's one end of the extreme.
mhm,
What I will say is, most commonly, when it comes to the personal property things, I don't find that my clients get too ridiculously hung up on the value.
okay,
Now, I've had the clients that have art collections that are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've had a few clients that have car collections that are significantly valuable. Um, not a majority of the
right,
world, right?
right,
And so most people that we're working with, they have modest estates. They have kind of what you would expect. And frankly, this might seem surprising, but in my experience, some of the most emotion and contention wasn't necessarily due to dollar value, it was due to sentiment. So I have a colleague, another attorney, who will tell the story that one of the nastiest probates that she ever litigated, the core issue was around antique Swedish baking items. And they weren't necessarily worth much, but they had this really intense sentimental value. And the emotions and the story that was attached to those
yeah,
items was what set things off. And there wasn't, if mom had had something saying, this person gets this item, this person gets this item,
mhm,
perhaps it wouldn't have spiraled as much as it did.
mhm,
Now, I'm going to tell kind of a funny story because this came up recently. Personally, my mom is she's in her mid 70s and she's starting to get rid of things and downsize as she's thinking about not staying in her house for the next 20 years, and uh, she has a really nice jewelry collection. My parents are car dealers. They have cars, she has really nice furniture. And I was visiting her and she said, is there anything that you want to take? Blah, blah, blah. And there were these 4 little porcelain puppies. One was a Cavalier, one was a little golden retriever, another one was white with different spots. Like I remember them from when I was little. And by the way, kind of goofy. Like they were very, it's not my mom's style, like whatever. But I have these memories of playing with them
mhm,
on the tile floor by the fireplace. And I really wanted those goofy
mhm,
porcelain puppies. And
mhm,
by the way, my mother never gets rid of anything.
mhm.
In fact, she brings up totes of things and says, if you don't want it, let me know. I'll take it back. And I'm like, oh my God.
Right.
Like, what are you going to do if I don't want it? You're obviously trying to unload it, right? She had given them to Goodwill.
Oh,
And she looked at me in
no.
horror and she goes, Rachel, because I went where they had been kept for, I don't know, 35 years and they weren't there. And I went, where are those? And she goes, I took those to Goodwill. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wanted those. And she goes, the one thing that I took. And I was actually pretty bummed.
Yeah,
You know what they're probably worth? 2 pennies, you know?
right.
And I share that because it's easy to pass those things.
Mhm,
And, I work with a lot of people who are planning for their children who are around my age or a little younger. And I share that story because I say, ask your kids. You might be
right. Just
surprised.
ask.
You might be surprised what they want.
Yes.
My mom probably thought Rachel's going to go, oh, can I have your wedding ring? Can I have
Mhm,
that? Can I have that?
mhm.
No, I wanted the porcelain
I wanted the
puppies.
dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah. That reminds me, well, my grandma passed really young at 67, but she she had nothing to her name. You know, she was an immigrant from Ireland. I mean, my grew up working 3 jobs. The biggest day of her life, she was a sandwich maker at Peter's Grill downtown, and
Okay.
President Clinton ate
Oh,
there one day while she was making sandwich. She didn't
that's
make his
cool.
sandwich, but that was a big day. She never got her
That's a big
driver's
day.
license, took the bus downtown, you know,
Okay.
just modest life, didn't have much. Um, but I have a tin that she would always keep the lifesavers in
Yes.
above her. And when we were good on Saturdays, after even if we weren't good,
Got a
you know, after we
lifesaver.
went with her to take her grocery shopping, she would pull that tin down and give
Yes.
us our thing of lifesavers. And also she had this little plaque above her, above the stove that says, like, said the little hen to the little rooster, well, you don't lay, why don't you lay any eggs anymore? So the little rooster, the little hen, well, you don't come around as often as you used to. I think I did it wrong. Hen,
Okay.
rooster, ooster,
Whatever,
rooster,
whatever.
ooster. But I just thought it was kind of funny
Yeah.
and like a little like quirky. And I said, Grandma, you know, when you don't like that anymore, like, can I have it? So like basically when you're dead, can I have
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
And I still have like the FedEx box that my mom saved it in that was like for Colleen
Oh,
when, you know,
yes.
grandma dies. Um,
Yeah.
and it just is like the fact that it was saved for me is equally as, and I have it as in a with a picture of her
Mm.
next, you know, that she has her little white castle uniform
Mhm,
and
mhm,
that was one of her jobs
mhm.
too. And and I have it on my mantle in my living room, and it's little stuff like that that just kind of makes me smile because I think of her and I think about how I think about even the ask of it, you know, and
Mhm.
the whole scenario. And it's like, right, but to someone else, that doesn't mean something, you know, or they don't care. But,
Yeah.
like, it is really good. Just give your kids the opportunity
Mhm.
to claim something.
Yes, and then and you're not I feel like partly my mom hangs on to things because she thinks we might want them.
Right.
And in the meantime, this miscommunication's happening and we're
Yep.
getting rid of the puppies and keeping the perhaps more valuable things, but where there's not a need, a desire, or a sentimental
And
value.
give your kids the opportunity that to have that ask, you
Mhm.
know, to say so that you can say, "Hey, I'm gonna start going through things,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna be starting to donate more so that it's not you guys' problems to deal with.
Yeah.
Is there something here that you really want that you've
Yeah.
never told me about?" Like, you know, do you wanna walk around the house, put a Post-it note on the back of
Mhm.
it, you know, but just thinking of those items and knowing that you only know what you know, and you have no idea what someone is hoping to claim one day, you know, kinda over your
Mhm.
dead body, as they say. You know, it's like some people might be like, "I can't wait to get the dumpster and get rid of everything," but it's like, "Oh, I actually can't wait to claim a few things that I enjoyed during my
Yeah.
childhood." So, that can be an act of love, and so we give you permission for that. Okay, when we come back, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna talk about some of the bigger things, like a house, a boat, a car. All right, Sorting Through Life with Colleen Waterston and Rachel Schromen. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sorting Through Life with Colleen Waterston and Rachel Schromen. So, Rachel Schromen is here from Schromen Law, and you do estate law and elder care law.
Mhm.
And we are talking about what people leave behind and legally
Mhm.
need to have claimed or, you know, put. So, with the little items, your suggestion from our last segment was to create a list that is referenced in the will and maybe, you know, in the document of all the things, but not necessarily written into the will because then it would have to be changed. You know, having something that's a document that's referenced
Mhm.
that could be changed more frequently
Yeah.
to update items. So then there's also big items, the house, the boat, the cars,
Mhm.
the bigger things. So how do people deal with the bigger things? And I'm kind of thinking the higher value
Yeah.
big things.
Yeah. So, I would say what's most typical is the higher value big things are just kind of regarded and treated as part of the entire estate. So, for example, say I have a client, they pass away, they own a house, they have a boat, they have a couple vehicles. It is more often than not likely that all of those items will be sold as part of the estate administration or the trust administration. Some of the money might be used to pay final medical bills, pay for the funeral, and then the money will be divided among the individuals inheriting.
Okay.
Now, say that person has passed away and they have 3 kids, and one of the children says, you know what, I actually really would like one of those vehicles. My car is kind of on its last leg. I like that vehicle, whatever.
Our grandchild is going to need a
Yeah.
vehicle soon. Could you gift it in your will? No?
Oh, I mean, in your will, yeah.
No. Okay.
Yeah. But where I was going to go with this is, say one of the beneficiaries wants the car, the value of it can count as part of their inheritance. So my point is rather than saying, I want this son to get my car, it can be left a little open ended, and those types of things can be figured out at that time. Now, I do have clients that say, I have a granddaughter who's, 17, and if something happened to me in the next 10 years, she might need a vehicle. I just got a new Lexus. I want to leave it to her. Yes, that can be part of your estate plan, 100%.
Okay.
Then,
is there any complication upon death? Do you have to pay taxes, or how does that work if you get gifted a car?
So first, it's state to state. In Minnesota, we do not have inheritance tax. So granddaughter inheriting the car, she's not going to have to pay tax on that. We have estate tax, but that's only going to apply if the person who passed away has an estate over $3 million.
Okay.
Now, the granddaughter inherits the car. She's going to have to be able to pay the insurance, put gas in it, do those types of things. But she's not going to pay a gift tax. She's not going to have to pay tax on having gotten that item.
So it can be as clean as
it can be quite easy.
This person gets this.
Yes.
And then that's out of the, that is removed from the value of everything else.
Yeah. And I do want to put in a little plug, this can get fact specific. Now if someone comes into me and they have a $4 million estate and they want to give one $100,000 vehicle, whatever. So there can be fact specific, but an attorney's job is to sit down with you and identify, what are your goals? What are your needs? What do you want to do? And then advise you on the most efficient and cost-effective way to make that happen.
So I'm just thinking, if I'm going into your office and I scheduled an appointment, I called you after going to schromenlaw.com, Schromen, SCHROMEN law.com.
Yeah.
And ideally, I've already decluttered my life with a legacy lifter brought to me by Space Organizing at
you're in a good spot.
Organizing.com. So I'm feeling like I got a handle on things.
Yes.
When I go to you, it's if I want to be the best client ever and the most prepared to put the best, legacy paperwork together, would it be beneficial to walk around my house and just list everything of high value? They say that the average person has 300,000 items in their life.
Right.
That's a lot. So probably not all of them, but that's including a paperclip, but there's a lot of stuff people have, but then there's the treasures, then there's the collections. So if I'm going into my meeting and I'm, because we want to do this series to help people do estate planning better and not just think about these things, but actually act on them. And if some attorneys, bucket, okay, this is what it's going to cost to get your will together. And we're not tick, 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 tick talking on every hour.
Yes.
Some people might be hourly. I know that normal people who aren't attorneys think expensive. So how can I best prepare for my time to get the most out of my will?
So your question started as, is it helpful for me to go around and list out all the items?
Yeah.
And my response is no, not necessarily. We ask, so we do an intake, and by the way, for the first meeting, keep it high level. If someone comes in and says, I want things to be very organized and I want every item to have a list of where it's going, then we're going to assign you homework. and we're going to support you in, okay, here's what we recommend you do, and here's what we recommend we work on together. But on the intake, we always ask a question of value of personal property. Now, most people come in and, like many of us, they have average things, and they'll go, well, I don't know. I mean, if you had a garage sale, my house would maybe do this. But when we ask about personal property, what will happen is if someone does have those more special individual high value items, they'll make a note of that. And that's good for us to know. What I will say is the high value individual items like that, they they do not come up very often in typical estate planning. And we don't work on a lot of estate plans where that's a high focus. I can talk about I can think of a few. One woman, actually, okay, so I have two clients who have had extensive Native American artifact collections where we did do inventories, accountings. Each of them are donating those items to a school and a organization. And so there was some work around that to be done for that reason. Someone who had a very significant art collection that was high value. I worked with a client who has this one was kind of a cool file, two Nobel Prizes.
Wow.
And those prizes themselves are worth multiple six figures. Yeah, it was pretty.
Really?
Yeah, that was interesting. And it's personal property. So, but those are
That's
like one-offs, right? And so
that's incredible.
what I will say is if a client walks into my office for their first meeting and they brought me like an 8-page spreadsheet of all of their personal property items, I'd be a little overwhelmed.
Okay, I won't add that to my offerings.
You could, I mean, but that's the
But
thing
for
for
them,
every
to
once in
have.
a while, we have someone who says, I want this list to be made. And by the way, usually they're signing their estate planning documents with us long before that list is done. That's kind of the beauty of having it as an attachment. And that's we're bouncing back a little to the last segment, but when we're talking about, passing those larger, higher value items like vehicles and houses, that's when we sometimes get to more than putting together a list. So, for example, say I just got a brand new custom Porsche 911. That baby's worth close to 200K.
This is a hypothetical.
This is yeah.
Okay.
Even if I could afford a car like that, I don't know that I could justify spending that kind of money. But let's
I
say
went on a date once with a guy who had like a very fancy car, and I was just like, he's not for me.
yeah,
We don't have the same values.
You got it. So anyway, but say I do have that, and I'm like, I want this vehicle to go to my brother, and I go to an attorney. The attorney's probably going to tell me, okay, here's what we can do. You have a couple options. One very easy option is you can do like almost a beneficiary designation through the DMV. Great.
Oh,
Yep.
It's that easy?
Can be. You also can own the car in a trust. Like there's multiple ways, but that's
Okay.
my point being is that's not necessarily like my Jeep's on a handwritten list. My Jeep's not
Okay.
worth 200,000. My Jeep's a 2019 Jeep, right? But with those really we've had some clients that have vehicle collections. Well, some of those vehicles we have owned in trust. I also have clients that have higher end luxury vehicles, DMV visit.
So it's like
Mhm.
having the bank account beneficiary so that it just passes directly to a person
Regardless of
by
value, yeah.
doing the DMV beneficiary,
Yes.
that car. And that's also then like the transfer and death deed.
Correct. Similar.
So for
And
real
actually,
estate,
I'll offer this as a middle ground. Manufactured homes, those
okay,
get dealt with the DMV.
because they're mobile.
Correct. Mhm. And so
Huh.
when we work with people that have manufactured homes and they want to make certain they avoid manufactured homes,
A
they're worth
lot.
money.
I've
Yes.
stayed. I go to. I have a very dear friend in Malibu who's
Yes.
in like the most gorgeous
Yeah.
mobile home community
Yes.
overlooking the beach, and I'm so lucky to have this friend. And I've had some
Yep.
of the best days of my life, and they're all brought in,
Yes.
like
And so
pre-made,
those
and then some stuff are finished
they're
in.
not cars,
Interesting.
but they're also not
Right. You can't
land.
drive it away, but it's not.
Correct.
You're like renting the land, and
Yes. So that's DMV. And then when people have real estate or land and they want to pass it to a certain individual or individuals and they want it to be very easy and straightforward, that's when we're having more of a step up conversation of, well, does passing the property by trust make sense? Do we want the property, or are we okay with the property going through probate? Or do we want to talk about a transfer on death deed?
And I think my whole goal with these episodes with
Yeah.
us is to inspire thought,
Correct.
and
Yep.
to say, start thinking about this, because like I started this, none of us are
Mhm.
getting out of this thing called life alive.
Right.
And I say, leave a legacy, not a burden.
Yep.
And there are ways for people to, you know, there are ways to make life easier for the people who you leave behind versus a big headache. And like for myself, my goal is that when I take my last breath and I am no longer in this body,
Mhm.
that people can just be sad they don't have me here.
Mhm.
Like that's what you want, is for people to be like, goodness, this really stinks to have to do life without
Yeah.
the coolest person ever. And oh, and how nice of her to have put all of this, really made sure that all of her estate situation was in order so that we can just be bummed that she's not here anymore, but
Mhm. Mhm.
follow this very well written plan,
Yep.
or like know that this is for me, know that I get this, and avoid some of the hassle. So
Mhm.
we're not sitting here being like, okay, so if you have a house to go to, that, like, yes, it's
No.
interesting to know about the DMV, and there's things that are interesting, but I think, to close this conversation from my point of view,
Mhm.
as somebody who helps people make sense of items within their home,
Mhm.
and that to me relates to, I think I can take some family tension out of it by having conversations with the owner of items
Mhm.
in advance. You and an estate attorney has the ability to make things so much easier in the
Mhm.
future. And so the whole push to people listening right now is just think about the fact that
Yep.
one day you will not be here to
Mhm.
speak on behalf of your things and everything that you've amassed, and are what would happen if that day comes tomorrow.
Mhm.
Okay, onward we go.
Yes.
I think we'll take a quick little break after that super fun call to action. We'll be right back with Colleen Waterston on Sorting Through Life, AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and Rachel Schromen, Schromen Law.
I'm kidding.
Welcome back to Sorting Through Life with Colleen Waterston on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. And I am here with Rachel Schromen of Schromen Law, Schromen, MEN, Law, but they are full of women at Schromen
Yeah.
Law. Female owned and very expertly operated business over there in St. Paul, but serving anyone who wants to work with them, but in the state of Minnesota.
Correct.
Okay. We have talked about stuff,
Mhm.
stuff being
Mhm.
anything from items that, antiques, wedding rings, all the
Mhm.
items of one's life. We've talked about the bigger items of like a home, of a car, of all that. And I want to kind of talk briefly about those items not going to family,
Yeah.
and then also just the idea of being able to, like, the impact that you can leave from the assets that you've acquired in
Mhm.
this life.
Mhm.
So, when you're thinking ahead, there's a lot more options than after the fact,
Mhm.
and I mean, I've done an episode with my dad all about a retired funeral director, all about the different things you can do with your body
Yeah.
other than traditional burial and
Yep.
cremation. And what I really wanted with that was like having a kind of casual conversation about something that you normally don't talk about,
Mhm.
and a lot of people don't talk about with their parents, and yet
Mhm.
they're the ones that are making the decision for their parents. But there are different unique ways to have your body, memorialized or live on through becoming, composted, or, just
Mhm.
where you get scattered. So, my goal with this is just to inspire thought
Mhm.
and more curiosity, or more, oh, I didn't even know I could do that. So there's always the more natural beneficiaries. I have these kids, or I have this spouse, or I have this best friend, or but so kind of speak to that, but speak to also like charity.
Yeah.
Like, I want to leave. Yes, I'm going to take care of my family. I'm going to give people, like, enough. Let's say like $100,000. Okay, I want to give half of it to my family, and I want to give half of it to a legacy, like to a charitable contribution. How does that work?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of ways that charitable intent or philanthropic intent can be included in estate planning, um, all across the board. I have done charitable planning as simple as a woman I worked with has a $50 gift to the Animal Humane Society. But first and foremost, before the rest of her estate gets split, she had very simple, modest estate, and we did a $50 gift. Amazing, um, great gift. And then I've had clients where they leave the first 3 million to their kids and the other 4 million to charity in a private foundation. So those are kind of two ends of the extreme, and then there's all sorts of things in between. So with estate planning, you can do like a dollar amount gift. You can also do a percentage. So I have some clients that say, I want the first 5% of my estate to go to these causes, or to my community of faith, or to these organizations that we support. And then the other 95% to these individuals. Some clients say, I want 100% of my estate to go to my children. If no children survive me, then in that situation, I want some charities. That's all charitable giving and charitable planning. Now, I could sit here and start talking about charitable trusts and, blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah,
it's
blah,
like
blah.
donor advised
Donor advised
funds.
funds. I mean, it can get more
Hmm.
complicated. And
So the question is,
yeah,
though, I could go to your office for my first meeting of estate planning, and you could be the first person that I
yeah,
ask about how can I give. I don't
yes.
need to know it before I talk to you.
Correct. And what's most helpful from an attorney's perspective is when a client comes in and tells me what they want to do and why, and then I help them identify how. So, interesting case I recently worked on. A woman came into my office, and she and her spouse they came in and they said, "Here's what we are going to do. We are going to leave this money to our children, and we are going to leave the rest of it to a private foundation that we want to establish in our name." And then she said, "By the way, we want all of this to be very, very simple, not legally complex, low in cost, and we don't want it to take a bunch of our time or our kids' times." Well, a private foundation is,
There's some parameters around that.
uh-huh,
Yeah.
and there's legal costs, and there's
Yeah.
legal process, and
And you have
there's
to have a board, and you
annual
have
meet
to
yes.
give a certain amount every year. And
Yes,
yeah, it's
and
not
so I
just like,
started
oh, that's
kinda
cute.
right, and so I
Like a
kinda
checkbook for good.
I gently was like, "I wanna talk about, like, are you sure you want a private foundation?" "Yes, we're sure." And I said, "Okay, let's step back a minute. Talk to me. Like, what's going on? What are your goal, blah, blah." And so we got all of that. And I said, I'm gonna offer you an advice letter. We didn't have time to talk about it, but I said, I'm gonna put this together and I want you to read through it. I just want to lay out some options. And to make a long story longer, they ended up doing a donor advised fund, not
Hmm.
a private foundation. And I found they did not end up naming their children as, managing this donor advised fund or anything. They found a foundation
Hmm.
that aligned with their values and their goals. And so sometimes when people come in, from an attorney's point of view, if they come in and they say, "This is what I want and this is what I need," it can kind of actually throw us off a bit. Um, and I've had clients that have done that, and we get partway into the work, and then I'm going, "Wait, why are we doing this?" And then I
Hmm.
go, "But pause, pause, pause. You came in, you said you wanted this document, but now it seems like you want this, this, and this." Well, yeah, those are the things I want. And I'm like, "Ugh, well, we're on the wrong trail doing this
Yeah.
document." So thinking of what you want and why. Um, when we were on the break, you had kind of mentioned like can people donate their house places? I had a woman I worked with once, and she came in and she said, I want to do a transfer on death deed to leave my house to this organization that I donate money to. Well, the first thing we always do is we check with the organization. Hi, organization. Do you accept gifts of real estate? And if so, do you accept it directly? Because if someone does a transfer on death deed on their house to an organization, guess what? The organization
They
owns the
have to
house.
sell it.
They have to sell it. They assume liability. It can actually become a burden and an expense.
Totally.
The organization that she wanted to leave it to said, well, we've never really had that before. What's this about? Blah, blah, blah. And so I went back to the client and I said, do you want to leave this house to this organization? What's your goal with that? And she said, well, the specific organization helped children who had been estranged or frankly disowned because they came out as gay to their parents. And she said, I want there to be a house where these children can land safely and live. Well, this organization didn't provide housing, but guess what?
Now they can.
No,
No, they
no,
didn't.
they're not in the business of it.
Okay.
But we were able to find another organization that did.
Okay.
And so that started as, like, and that's part of the legal process. And this is what attorneys should be doing is when, a client tells you, I want to leave a house for this purpose to this charity. The next step is we reach out to the charity and we're like, what's the best way to effectuate this goal? And by the way, is this something the organization can do? And so that client ended up leaving her house to this other organization that is in the business of taking that house and setting up housing. And I think she did, I think she named the other organization as part of a beneficiary on like an IRA or something. But there's different ways to, figure that out. And I know in your work, I imagine that, if you're working with someone who's downsizing after a death, if they have 6 bikes in the garage, maybe those are going to an organization that uses those bikes for veterans. Like being able, that's another example of how charity and philanthropy and more of that giving back can happen on the front end or the back end.
Right. And ideally, and I'm encouraging people to do it for themselves, so that, it's like I say leave a legacy, not a burden all the time, but it's like if you think it's a lot to figure out where these bikes should go, that'll make you feel good. So do your kids, probably. That's putting it on them.
Yeah.
What's interesting, I notice when I bring something up to you, I feel like my natural kind of more controlling my brain, like, oh, I can get this queued up for her. Oh, I would go and should we bring it, practically drafted so that it's just easier. And a lot of the times that I suggest how I would show up, you very politely let me know that that makes your job harder. And I think that's good to know. And I'm glad to be the person that says it to you so that people listening can be like,
Yeah.
oh, don't do what Colleen suggested and let Rachel do her job. Because that's also like when I'm in people's houses and sometimes they want to be really part of the process. And I'm like, so respectfully, you didn't get this organized in like 5 years, you were telling me, and I'm gonna do it in a day. But it's not actually gonna help me if you're here helping. Like helping in quotes. It's like,
Yes.
yes, you're an extra set of hands, but you're also gonna talk and bring up the guilt that you feel. And like you let me just do this.
Yeah.
This is what I do. Like, like you are in good hands. I'm very good at making sense of stuff, of creating calm from chaos, of seeing this massive mess and turning it into something that has a lot of order. And you telling me where you think things should go and how, like, I'll listen. I want to know your main goal and I want to know your pressure points and I want to know what I can fix. And when I come to your house, please don't clean it up so that I can see it as it is and bring my problem solving brain. That's what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make a meal at the end of the day, but I need to know what meals you're making. It feels like a lot of what comes up is like, have the ideas, have the questions, but then don't try to solve them all before you get to you, because that might just go to
Right.
the lawyer and say, how do I
Well,
do
and
this?
it comes from a place of trying to be helpful because I do the same thing constantly with professionals, and I've had to teach myself, yes, one, to let people do their jobs, but two, to remind myself that I'm allowed to accept help and I'm allowed to not do everything. And it comes from this place of like, well, I need to be, I'm going to be helpful and I'm going to make their job easier. And it's like, no, I'm making my life harder and their life harder. And I have a hard time receiving support and letting people come in and just do what they do. I made a referral to you last week, I think, and I actually just the client that I referred to you, she just experienced a stroke. She's widowed. She's going through a very hard time, and her house, when she returns home, and you know about this, but I'll, for the listeners, when she returns home, in order for her to come home and have the equipment she needs and be able to navigate the house safely, organizing and restructuring of the home needs to happen. And I got an email from a family member who's helping her with all of this that said she won't be home for 3 to 4 weeks. Should we wait to get things started until she's back so she can oversee it? And I was like, oh dear God. And I guarantee you, they're like, oh, she should really be there. This is not fair to the person we're hiring. And this particular client probably feels this sense of responsibility because it's her house. And I immediately responded and I said, one, I think it is ideal that this gets done before she comes back. And also, like, she's returning home from having a stroke and now she's having to oversee. No, give her the gift of not having to deal with it.
I will just say though, like, I am very big not throwing people's stuff away without
Right?
their permission.
Totally.
So I will say, to kind of say, oh, well, in my point of expertise, like, if there's any thought that there will be anxiety that comes from coming back home and your stuff is not there, not to,
Mhm.
like, call me first so that I can have that conversation with
Well,
you
and
about,
that's right.
it's like,
And the bottom line is when you get hired, you're setting those parameters
right.
and learning that. But
And like
I shared
learning,
with this client, professionals know what should be thrown away and what shouldn't, and professionals know how to organize things to be gone through later.
so on that note, we are two very trusted, amazing professionals here in the Twin Cities area. Call Rachel Schromen for any of your estate planning needs. Call Colleen Waterston, 612-747-1331. Call Colleen for stuff, for the organizing of all of your things, and call Rachel for the organizing of your estate documents. And listen to us as much as you'd like on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota.